Hey guys, MEC here for the ScanPro Gaming tab for another video review. Today we're going to be taking a look at our first Razer product, the DeathAdder Chroma. Now this is a mouse or a brand of mouse or even just a name of mouse that I try to stay away from, and the reason being is I've used the 3 and 3.5G DeathAdder for a number of years now, and when the 2013 edition, the refresh with the 4G sensor, was released, featuring that 6400 DPI S3988 sensor, I was a little bit disappointed. I felt the build quality was a step backwards, the mouse too was mushy, accidentally activated it a hell of a lot, and that was about the same time as it was competing in New Game Shoot Mania, and I just felt that it didn't live up to the hype and performance of the original 3.5G that I was using at that period. Of course, since then, the 3.5G was obviously discontinued, and I've been unable to get new ones, and I actually ended up switching over to a Logitech G402 for the past few months. To be honest though, the shape just is not as good in my opinion for my hand, and again, very much personal preference, as the Razer DeathAdder. So when the Chroma came out, I've been trying to avoid testing it, having had bad experiences with the 2013, but I finally caved in, I've picked it up, and let me just say, and again I'm recording this after having used it, I am another fan of Razer. This has pretty much fixed the majority of issues that I did have, bearing in mind there's still no DPI buttons to actually change without going into the software, but again the software can now be running offline mode, and they fixed the mouse 2 issue and a few other things which you're going to get into now. But yeah, hopefully this is, let's just say, I guess, apology to the people that have listened to me give crap to the DeathAdder for a while now, but I honestly think that the Razer DeathAdder Chroma is a great mouse, and you're going to see why. So yeah, enjoy the video and we'll catch you at the end. The by now infamous Razer DeathAdder, and this time Chroma edition, is a right-handed ergonomic design mouse with 5 buttons and textured rubber side grips. Its approximate size is 127mm in length, 70 in width and 44 in height, with a very low 105 grams in terms of weight. The sensor inside is the S3988 Optical Gaming Sensor with DPI of up to 10,000. Now typically on this sensor we see DPI of about 6400 max, so Razer have clearly interpolated this further, and when reviewing we're going to be testing at about 1600 to 1800 DPI maximum. But this sensor does feature a very high max tracking speed at 200 inches per second, more than enough for every sensitivity, and if you want to make changes to any of the DPI levels or custom lift-off distance, etc., you will need to download Razer Synapse 2.0, requiring you to sign in, but later can be run in offline mode. Now underneath the mouse you find 3 mouse feet, all of which do need to be removed to gain access to the internal, something you shouldn't do as it will void your warranty. And in terms of connections, we've got a 7-foot lightweight braided cable ended in a gold-plated USB connector. But I guess one of the main selling points with this mouse is of course the RGB lighting, and I have to say it's one of the more impressive LED light implementations into any mouse I've used. The lighting is very even, vibrant, and yeah, more impressive than almost everything else on the mouse. But in terms of the build quality, this is probably the best Razer DeathAdder that I've used in a number of years in my opinion, and again very much personal preference. The Razer DeathAdder is the most comfortable right-handed mouse on the market. Again, it will differ from person to person. Some people prefer the feel of the 3.0 from Microsoft, others the EC1 from Zowie, and others further the SteelSeries rival, but for me the DeathAdder nails it, and here they've improved on pretty much everything since not only the 3.5G but the 2013. The buttons are very crisp, mouse 4 and mouse 5 are fantastic, and the mouse wheel, again, I see very little they could have improved upon further, maybe just adding additional buttons such as DPI toggle on the top of the mouse, something that's definitely missing and otherwise requires you to launch into Synapse to make changes. And with that said, why don't we have a look at Synapse and the features you have here for customization with your DeathAdder Chroma. So moving into Razer Synapse 2.0, the software for the mouse, it's definitely one of the more controversial ones on the market because it's quite simple, it requires you to sign in. However, once in, if we click the blanked out email, you can go offline. So it will run in offline mode, and as well as that, the mouse will store one profile to the mouse. So if you install it, set your DPI in mouse hertz and uninstall or close, it will still stick with that. You don't necessarily need it running all the time. But this is what you're greeted with, and I recommend you do this at least once just so you're up to date on a firmware. Fix any issues that may have already been ironed out since launch. But mouse customize, here we can rebind all the buttons on the mouse and create and delete those profiles I was talking about, one of which is persistent. Next tab along we have performance. Here we have our sensitivity, of which we can set separate X and Y. Can be useful, and in fact is default like this in the UT engine with the Y sensitivity being a little bit lower, particularly when you're not moving up and down as you are left and right as much. So it can be useful. Personally, I don't take advantage of it, but it's DPI of up to 10,000 in increments of 50 from as low as 100. We've got it set to 1600. Again, kind of disappointed there aren't DPI buttons to the left of mouse 1 like on the Logitech mice, or even just DPI buttons up top to change. It will mean I have to come into software to change this whenever I want to. But we have got control over the acceleration. Again, good here as it does feature the 3988 sensor, of which there is no inherent to the sensor natively, so you can fully control it here in the software or in game afterwards. And finally, our polling rate, of which we have 125, 500 or 1000, 500 being 2 milliseconds, 1000 being 1. Again, you might as well just use 1000. Now, in terms of missing features here, would have liked to have seen an option to enable and disable prediction with a power off, like we saw on the ROG Gladius that features the same sensor. But that aside, not the end of the world, it's just something I would have liked to have seen. Now, before we move on, we've also got our warranty registration, which we get 2 years with the mouse. And if we have other products plugged in, we will see them along the bottom here, such as keyboard, headset, etc. But next tab along we have lighting, and again, lighting, one of the more impressive implementations on any gaming mouse on the market. Evenly lit, and here we can select spectrum lighting, which is rotating between all the different colors as you may see on the mouse for both the mouse wheel and the Razer logo. And we can also set static, of which we get full RGB, as well as turn it off, and an option to switch off all lighting when your display is turned off, which is also pretty neat as well, particularly when you turn off the computer as well. But finally, we have calibration, surface calibration. This is going to allow you to customize the lift-off distance. Great if you have pattern mouse pads as well, because if you go too low on a pattern mouse pad, it will skip as you transition over the colors. So being able to customize it is great. And you can either select one of the preset Razer ones, or you can create your own like I have done for the SteelSeries QCK Heavy. You simply calibrate, hold left mouse button, and move the mouse. And we're doing this very quickly. Normally I take a little bit more time with this, but once we hit save, we can then further customize the lift-off distance. It's already been reduced. Default is about 10, 1 being the lowest. Personally, I leave it on 3 or just uncalibrated, which is actually what I leave it on 99.9% of the time. It works great to me. The lift-off isn't too high, but it is higher, something that I like. I don't like it to be too low day to day. Next tab along, we've got macros. Here we can set all our different macros. More useful if you've got a keyboard, I guess, but you know, the neat thing is you can still do it with the mouse. You're just limited in terms of buttons, like you are without the DPI buttons. And finally, we have stats, which takes a little bit of time to load up, so we are going to skip ahead. Now, a few companies are building in similar tech with their products, Logitech and Rocket to name two, but Razer is definitely the most in-depth in terms of features you're getting here. Now, on the right here, we can see our quick base stats, mouse clicks, distance, wheel rotations, etc. On the left here, we've got our automatically detected games through Steam and Origin. You can also add your own if it's not finding them. And in this one, you're going to get all your separate individual stats, as well as for heat maps. Now, this I've not had a chance to play around with yet, but as you can see here, sample data, sample mouse movement data, and keystrokes is very in-depth, and it's just a neat bonus to get with it, and something definitely to look into if you do pick up the mouse. And obviously you can also share, which doesn't seem to be appearing here because I'm not actually logged in. If we click on the settings tab, you can see data tracking units, reset data, accounts here where you can link it up, and then obviously they'll appear at the bottom, I'm sure. And about currently running software version 1.01.37. But overall, I guess I'm very much impressed with the software options we're getting here on the Razer DeathAdder Chroma. Again, lacking a DPI button or two, which could tie in and prevent the need of the software, and also an option to enable prediction. But aside from that, no complaints. And with that said, let's jump into some acceleration tests. So, as always, find ourselves back in Quake Live for our acceleration test to show a lack of it in the S3988 sensor after it's been implemented into the Razer DeathAdder Chroma. So I'll line our crosshair up with this wall here. We're going to move our mouse from the left to the right of our mouse pad until it stops tracking, and as you can see, we're sort of to the left of this line right here. And again, if there's acceleration, we'd end up all the way over here, or even negative slightly behind it by a significant margin still. So going to be putting our crosshair back, and this time going quickly, and again, as you can see, slightly behind that line. And once more for science, again taking into account some small degree of human error, again slightly behind it. So we can safely say, as expected, a lack of acceleration, meaning muscle memory can be trained. Again, I repeat this every review, but moving your mouse X centimeters on the mouse pad is always going to translate to the same distance in game, no matter how fast or slow you move the mouse. That's what you want, and that also means if you want to go and add your own preferred amount of acceleration, either in the drivers or in game through commands, you'll be able to do so. For example, if we were to do CL mouse excel 0.0 0.03, and then do sensitivity 0.0 or 0.2 maybe. We get our slow movement, and we're also able to flick if we want to, whereas if there was no acceleration we wouldn't be able to go this low. So yeah, exactly what I want to see from Razer in the Chroma, no complaints. And now let's move into some mouse button debounce tests. So back in Shoot Mania as always here for our mouse review, and we're going to test the theory of mouse button debounce time and if it's low enough here on the DeathAdder Chroma. Now it's important to have a low debounce time because essentially if you use mouse 1 to fire and mouse 2 to jump in a game like Quake Live, if you then try and do a full height rocket jump, one of those buttons is going to be slightly delayed behind the other one, therefore you either jump first or shoot first and press the other one slightly afterwards, and it won't even be your fault, it'll just happen. And here in Shoot Mania we've got a variable jump as well, where if we hold mouse 2 we'll do a full height jump, and if we tap we do a small jump. So essentially I'm going to hold the mouse with the left hand and just tap the right mouse button, and if we do a lot of consecutive mini jumps, which as you can see we do, we can safely say the mouse button debounce time is low enough that it isn't going to be a problem. And obviously in Quake Live if we do a rocket jump from red armor to bridge and over to railgun, and in Blood Run if we do a rocket jump from lower yellow up into the shotgun corridor area, you can see it's perfectly fine there too. No issues with full height rocket jumping. So the Chroma is pretty much excelling in every area. So why don't we go and actually put it to the testing game. So gaming with the DeathAdder Chroma, I really wanted to hate it. And I say that lightly because having used the 3.5G for many years, won a lot of tournaments with it, I just have high expectations. And on trying the 2013 edition with the green LEDs, I just felt the sensor didn't feel as responsive. The mouse 2 was completely different to mouse 1 in a lot of cases, more mushy, and just resting your finger on it would activate it. And in general, the build just didn't live up to the hype that I built for the 3.5G. But on the first game that I tried with the Chroma, I felt straight at home. In fact, the video you're watching in the background was my first session with the mouse, and I've been using it since. And this mouse is just everything that I remember using the Razer DeathAdder 3.5. The sensor felt snappy and responsive in tracking people in Quake 3, no issues. The mouse 1 and 2 buttons are even better than the 3.5, so responsive, no issues there as well when it comes to hitting people as they peek out from corners, no issues with button latency, and the max tracking speed of this thing is way and above at 5.33 meters per second, tested at 1600 dpi at 1000 hertz in a notice. Again, not the most accurate method, but accurate enough to say that you're going to have no issues with the sensor max tracking speed. It won't be malfunctioning even for the lowest of sensitivities. Now, it's not all positive, and again, without diving too much into final thoughts, I would have liked to have seen Razer update the design a little bit. Having used the G402 and 502 from Logitech, I definitely missed the buttons to the left of mouse 1, especially being able to change DPI for some of the newer games like Evolve, where the developers haven't added a low enough sensitivity, where 1600 DPI is just still too fast, even at 0% in game. So again, would have liked to have maybe seen some DPI buttons on top, rather than having to open Synapse and change the DPI manually, something I still don't necessarily 100% agree with, having to log in to use it. But that aside, this mouse felt great in every aspect, and I guess what I want to kind of clarify here is that I used the 2013 edition on launch, and whilst the shell and everything else is most definitely an improvement here, because the sensor is the same, just with interpolated DPI pushing it further here on the Chroma to the 2013, I don't know whether the 2013 feels as good if it's had a firmware update or anything like that. But what I can safely say is if you are looking to pick up a DeathAdder for gaming specifically, you should have no issues with this mouse. And again, with that said, let's jump into final thoughts. So final thoughts then for the DeathAdder Chroma. You've heard me give it praise throughout the video, and it's very difficult for me to build up on that further. It's a mouse that I'm definitely going to use moving forward. The sensor performance is there, the build quality is a step up from the 3.5G, and most definitely from the 2013, which I'm not really going to apologise for, because I do think Razer took a step in the backwards direction with that mouse. Whether they fixed these sensor issues for a firmware update since then, I don't know. After all, it does use the same sensor. But the build quality in mouse 2 in particular is definitely where I want it to be here on the Chroma. But like I said, the sensor performance of this mouse, the technology in it has existed for some time now, and the performance of this mouse is matched by a number of other mice we reviewed here on the channel. But for me, it really comes down to the ergonomic and comfort level, and it's a mouse shape design that I've used for so many years in a number of tournaments, and that's why I personally use it. And again, personal preference is a huge factor in any gaming mouse that you use. If it's not comfortable, you shouldn't use it. End of story. Doesn't matter how good the sensor is. So the Chroma is just a familiar form factor that I like. And if you are not a fan of the DeathAdder shape, don't buy it because I said it performed great. Just don't do it. Instead, go for a shape that suits you. But there are some negatives to this mouse, and those lack of DPI buttons go further than just being unable to change DPI in game. Yes, you may have to tab out, open Synapse to change DPI for games like Evolve or Battlefield Hardline depending on the sensitivity values they offer. But when it comes to a game like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, for example, if you need to change your DPI for that game or take advantage of lift-off distance calibration, and in fact lift-off distance calibration is a feature only available when Synapse is open, as are macros, despite having an onboard profile that will only save DPI in mouse hertz. So if you stream Counter-Strike Global Offensive with OBS and you have Synapse open, CSGO will crash. There is something going on there with Synapse as of February 2015 that just does not like capturing Counter-Strike Global Offensive in OBS. Don't know why, just doesn't work. So if you're one of those people that has to close Synapse, you lose features like lift-off distance and macros. And if you lose those features, you also cannot change DPI because you've got Synapse closed. And you cannot open Synapse if you've got CSGO open while streaming. So it isn't a perfect mouse, but it's only really missing those DPI buttons, and the rest Razer can address through software updates. I don't know what it is there with Synapse and CSGO and OBS, but I would like Razer, if you watch this video, for you to address those issues. And I'm going to continue to use this mouse like I say. It's the shape that I like. The performance is there. So if they do fix it, I will update in the description and a video annotation at a later date. So yeah, I've been MVC here for the Scan Pro Gaming tab. If you're in the market, you want a right-handed ergonomic design mouse, palm grip, claw grip as well if you've got a larger hand size, comfortable, performs well, then the DeathAdder Chroma could be the one for you. But again, there are many mice on the market, it's just this one is for me. So yeah, cheers guys, and catch you next time here on the Scan Pro Gaming tab.